Welcome to True.
Linus Yale Sr., the father of modern lock technology. Chapter 1, Early Life and Background. Linus Yale Sr. was born on April 4, 1797, in Salisbury, Connecticut, during a period when America was still a young nation, finding its industrial footing. His early years were spent in a rural New England community where craftsmanship and practical skills were highly valued. The Yale family had established roots in Connecticut, and young Linus grew up in an environment that emphasized self-reliance, ingenuity, and hard work. Connecticut in the early 19th century was becoming a hub for manufacturing and innovation. The state's workshops and small factories were beginning to produce clocks, firearms, and various metal goods that would eventually give rise to what became known as Yankee ingenuity. This was the world that shaped Linus Yale Sr., a world where mechanical aptitude was not just appreciated but essential for economic survival and success. As a young man, Yale showed a natural aptitude for understanding how things worked. He was fascinated by mechanisms, gears, and the principles of mechanics that governed everyday tools and devices. This curiosity would serve as the foundation for his later innovations in lock technology. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who might have been content with farming or traditional trades, Yale was drawn to the emerging field of precision metalwork and mechanical design. The early 1800s were a time of significant change in America. The Industrial Revolution was beginning to transform how goods were produced, and security concerns were growing alongside increasing prosperity and urbanization. Banks were being established, businesses were expanding, and with this growth came the need for better ways to protect valuable property. The locks of the day were relatively primitive, often large and cumbersome, made by blacksmiths who treated each lock as a custom piece rather than a standardized product. Yale's education was typical for his era and social class. He learned practical skills through apprenticeship and hands-on experience rather than formal schooling. This practical education gave him an intimate understanding of materials, particularly metals, and how they could be shaped, hardened, and fashioned into functional devices. He learned to work with iron, brass, and steel, understanding the properties of each material and how they could be best utilized in mechanical applications. Chapter 2, The Beginning of a Lock-Making Career. Linus Yale Sr. began his professional life in the 1810s, initially working as a craftsman and inventor in various capacities. However, it was in the 1840s that he truly found his calling in the lock-making business. By this time, Yale had moved to Newport, New York, a small community in the Mohawk Valley region of upstate New York. This area was strategically located along important transportation routes, including the Erie Canal, which had opened in 1825 and transformed commerce in the region. In Newport, Yale established himself as a locksmith and inventor, setting up a workshop where he could experiment with different lock designs and mechanisms. The timing was fortuitous. America was experiencing rapid economic growth, and the demand for secure locks was increasing dramatically. Banks, shops, and wealthy homeowners all needed reliable ways to protect their property from theft. The locks available at the time, however, were often inadequate for these growing security needs. Yale began studying existing lock designs, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. He examined the work of European lockmakers, particularly the sophisticated but expensive locks being produced in England. He also looked at the simpler, more common locks used throughout America, which were often easy to pick or bypass. Yale recognized that there was a significant gap in the market for locks that were both secure and affordable, locks that could be manufactured in quantities rather than individually crafted by blacksmiths. The challenge Yale set for himself was substantial. He needed to create locks that were mechanically sophisticated enough to resist picking and forced entry, yet simple enough to be manufactured efficiently and sold at reasonable prices. This required not just mechanical innovation, but also an understanding of manufacturing processes and market needs. Yale was essentially trying to transform lockmaking from a craft into an industry. During these early years of his lock-making career, Yale worked tirelessly in his workshop, creating prototypes and testing different mechanisms. He understood that a lock's security depended on the complexity of its internal mechanism and the precision with which its parts were manufactured. A lock with loose tolerances could be easily manipulated, while one with precise, tight-fitting parts would be much more secure. This insight would guide his innovations for years to come. Yale also recognized the importance of the key design and overall lock security. The keys of his era were typically large, heavy instruments with simple bit patterns that corresponded to internal lever mechanisms. Yale began experimenting with different key designs, seeking patterns that would be more difficult to duplicate or simulate with improvised tools. This early experimental work laid the groundwork for his most significant invention. Chapter 3. The Invention of the Pin Tumbler Lock. Linus Yale Sr. Quote. His most important contribution to lock technology came with his development and refinement of the pin tumbler lock mechanism. While Yale did not invent the basic principle of the pin tumbler from scratch, similar concepts had existed in ancient Egypt and had been described in historical texts. He was the first to successfully adapt this principle into a practical, manufacturable lock for the modern era. The pin tumbler concept is elegantly simple, yet remarkably effective. The lock contains a cylinder, called a plug, that can rotate within a larger cylinder, called the housing or shell. Between these two cylinders are several vertical shafts, each containing 2 or more pins of varying lengths. Springs push these pins downward into the plug, preventing it from rotating. The key to the lock has a series of cuts along its blade, each corresponding to one of the pin stacks. When the correct key is inserted into the lock, its cuts align each pin stack so that the breakpoint between the driver pin, the top pin, and the key pin, the bottom pin, sits exactly at the shear line, the boundary between the plug and the housing. With all pins aligned at the shear line, the plug can rotate freely, allowing the lock to open. If the wrong key is used, the pins will not align properly, and the plug cannot turn. Yale's genius was not just in understanding this principle, but in executing it in a way that could be manufactured consistently and reliably. In the 1840s, he developed what became known as the Yale double-acting lever tumbler lock, which incorporated pin tumbler principles. This lock was significantly more secure than the common locks of the day, which typically used simple lever mechanisms or warded lock designs that could be picked relatively easily by anyone with basic lock-picking skills. The manufacturing of Yale's pin tumbler locks required precision metalworking that was pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the 1840s. The pins needed to be uniform in diameter and smooth in finish. The cylinders needed to be perfectly round and concentric, and the springs needed to provide consistent pressure. Yale had to develop not just the lock design, but also the manufacturing processes and quality control methods to ensure each lock performed reliably. Yale's pin tumbler locks offered several significant advantages over existing designs. They were more pick resistant because the mechanism was internal and not easily accessible or visible. They were more compact, allowing them to be used in applications where larger lever locks were impractical. They were also more reliable, with fewer parts to wear out or malfunction. These advantages made Yale's locks attractive to banks, businesses, and homeowners who were increasingly concerned about security. The key design for Yale's pin tumbler locks was also innovative. Unlike the large, ornate keys common in that era, Yale's keys were smaller and featured a flat blade with cuts along one edge. This design would eventually evolve into the familiar flat key with teeth that we use today. The compact key design was not just convenient, it also made the locks more secure because the key blanks were more difficult to obtain and the cuts were harder to duplicate accurately without specialized equipment. Yale obtained several patents for his lock innovations during the 1840s and 1850s. These patents protected his intellectual property and gave him exclusive rights to manufacture and sell locks based on his designs. The patents also provided detailed documentation of his inventions, allowing us to understand exactly how his locks worked and what made them innovative for their time. Chapter 4. Building the Yale Lock Company. With his innovative lock designs gaining recognition, Linus Yale Sr. focused on building a business to manufacture and market his products. In 1840, he established what would eventually become the Yale Lock Company in Newport, New York. This was more than just a workshop. It was a manufacturing operation designed to produce locks in quantities that could meet growing market demand. Building a lock manufacturing business in the 1840s presented numerous challenges. Yale needed to acquire or build the machinery necessary to produce lock components with the precision his designs required. He needed to train workers in the specialized skills necessary for lock assembly and quality control. He needed to establish supply chains for raw materials, particularly brass and steel, and he needed to develop marketing and distribution channels to reach customers across a rapidly expanding nation. Yale's approach to manufacturing was innovative for his time. Rather than having each lock handcrafted from start to finish by a single artisan, he implemented early forms of division of labor and standardization. Different workers would specialize in specific aspects of lock production. Some would manufacture pins, others would machine cylinders, others would assemble the components, and others would test the finished products. This approach improved efficiency and consistency while allowing workers to develop expertise in their specific tasks. The standardization of parts was particularly important for Yale's business model by ensuring that pins, cylinders, springs, and other components were manufactured to consistent specifications. Yale could achieve interchangeability, a concept that was revolutionary in American manufacturing at the time. This meant that if a component failed, it could be replaced with another identical part, rather than requiring custom fabrication. It also meant that locks could be assembled from stockpiled components, rather than being custom-made for each order. Yale's locks quickly gained a reputation for quality and security. Banks began installing Yale locks on their vaults and safes. Businesses used Yale locks to secure their premises and stockrooms. Government offices and institutions adopted Yale locks for protecting sensitive documents and valuables. Each installation served as an advertisement for Yale's products, building brand recognition and customer trust. The pricing strategy for Yale's locks was carefully considered. While his locks were more expensive than the cheapest locks available, they were positioned as premium products that offered superior security. Yale marketed his locks, not as commodities, but as investments in protection and peace of mind. For customers who had valuable property to protect, the higher price of a Yale lock was justified by the increased security it provided. Yale also understood the importance of continuous improvement and innovation. He didn't rest on his initial success, but continued refining his designs, developing new models, and adapting his locks for different applications. He developed locks specifically designed for bank vaults, locks for residential doors, padlocks, and specialized locks for commercial applications. This product diversification helped the company grow and reach different market segments. The reputation of Yale's company extended beyond just the security of his locks. Yale built a reputation for excellent customer service, standing behind his products with guarantees and offering repair services when needed. This customer-centric approach helped build lasting relationships with clients and generated positive word of mouth that was invaluable for business growth in an era before mass advertising. Chapter 5. Technical Innovation and Design Philosophy. Linus Yale Sr. S. approach to lock design was grounded in several key principles that set his work apart from that of his contemporaries. First and foremost was the principle of internal complexity. Yale understood that a lock's security depended on having an internal mechanism that was difficult to understand, visualize, or manipulate from outside. His pin tumbler designs embodied this principle by hiding the locking mechanism inside nested cylinders where it could not be directly observed or accessed. The second principle was precision manufacturing. Yale recognized that security increased with the precision of the lock's components. Tight tolerances between the plug and housing made it difficult to manipulate pins with picks or shims. Uniform pin dimensions ensured consistent performance. Smooth surfaces reduced friction and made the lock easier to operate with the correct key while making manipulation attempts more difficult. This emphasis on precision required Yale to push the boundaries of contemporary metalworking capabilities. A third principle was simplicity of operation. Despite the internal complexity of his locks, Yale designed them to be simple for legitimate users to operate. A correct key should open the lock smoothly and reliably, without requiring special technique or excessive force. This user-friendliness was important for market acceptance. People would not adopt locks that were difficult or frustrating to use, no matter how secure they were. Yale also applied the principle of durability in his designs. His locks were built to withstand years of regular use, without degrading in performance. He selected materials that would resist wear and corrosion. He designed mechanisms that would not bind or seize up over time. He ensured that springs maintained their tension through thousands of operating cycles. This durability meant that Yale locks were not just secure when new, but remained secure throughout their service life. The aesthetics of Yale's locks were also carefully considered. While security and functionality were paramount, Yale understood that locks were visible products that needed to be acceptable to customers from an appearance standpoint. His locks featured clean lines, quality finishes, and professional craftsmanship that conveyed reliability and quality. The locks looked like precision instruments, which they were, and this appearance reinforced customer confidence in the product. Yale's technical innovations extended beyond the basic pin tumbler mechanism. He experimented with different pin configurations, including the use of multiple pins per shaft and pins of different shapes and sizes. He developed anti-picking features that made his locks more resistant to manipulation. He designed keyways with complex shapes that prevented unauthorized key blanks from being inserted. Each of these innovations added layers of security to his lock designs. The testing and quality control processes Yale implemented were rigorous for his era. Each lock was tested before leaving the factory to ensure it operated correctly with its key and could not be easily bypassed or picked. Yale himself was known to personally test locks and to challenge locksmiths to attempt to pick his designs. These practical tests, rather than just theoretical security, gave Yale and his customers confidence in the products. Yale's design philosophy also included adaptability. He understood that different applications had different security requirements and constraints. A bank vault lock needed maximum security regardless of size or cost, while a residential door lock needed to balance security with affordability and ease of installation. Yale developed different product lines tailored to these different needs, rather than trying to create a one-size-fits-all solution. Chapter 6, The Family Legacy and Linus Yale Jr. One of the most significant aspects of Linus Yale Sr.'s life was his influence on his son, Linus Yale Jr., who would take his father's innovations to even greater heights. Linus Yale Jr. was born in 1821 in Salisbury, Connecticut, and grew up immersed in his father's work on locks and security mechanisms. From an early age, he was exposed to the principles of mechanical design, precision manufacturing, and the lockmaking trade. The relationship between father and son was one of mentorship and collaboration. Linus Yale Sr. taught his son not just the technical skills of lockmaking, but also the business principles necessary to succeed in manufacturing and marketing security products. Young Linus learned to work metal, to understand the principles of pin tumbler mechanisms, to think about security from an attacker's perspective, and to consider the practical needs of customers. As Linus Yale Jr. matured, he became increasingly involved in his father's business. He worked in the workshop, contributed to design improvements, and eventually began developing his own innovations. The younger Yale had advantages his father did not. He grew up with access to better education, more advanced metalworking equipment, and a foundation of knowledge about pin tumbler locks that his father had to develop from scratch. Linus Yale Sr. encouraged his son's innovations and supported his efforts to push lock technology forward. This supportive relationship allowed for a smooth transition when Linus Yale Jr. eventually took over the primary role in lock development and business management. Rather than competing or conflicting, the two generations of Yales complemented each other, with the father's practical experience and manufacturing knowledge combining with the son's technical education and fresh perspectives. The elder Yale lived to see his son make significant improvements to his pin tumbler designs. In 1861, Linus Yale Jr. patented what became known as the Yale cylinder lock, which featured several improvements over his father's earlier designs. This lock used a more compact cylinder design, an improved key shape, and manufacturing methods that made the locks more affordable to produce in large quantities. It was essentially a refinement and evolution of his father's original concepts. Linus Yale Sr.'s influence extended beyond just technical knowledge. He instilled in his son the values of quality, integrity, and customer service that had made the Yale name respected in the lock industry. He taught him about the importance of patents and intellectual property protection. He showed him how to balance innovation with practicality, creating products that were not just clever, but genuinely useful and marketable. The younger Yale would go on to found the Yale Lock Manufacturing Company in 1868 with partner Henry R. Town, creating what would become one of the world's most recognized lock brands. This company built directly upon the foundation established by Linus Yale Sr., using his pin tumbler principles and manufacturing approaches while introducing new innovations and expanding into national and international markets. Tragically, Linus Yale Sr. did not live to see the full extent of his legacy. He passed away in 1858 at the age of 61, while his son was still developing the innovations that would make the Yale name famous worldwide. However, the elder Yale had lived long enough to see his pin tumbler locks gain acceptance, to establish a successful lock manufacturing business, and to ensure that his son was prepared to carry on and expand upon his work. The father-son legacy of the Yales represents an important pattern in American industrial history, the passing of knowledge and innovation across generations, with each generation building upon the work of the previous one. Without Linus Yale Sr.'s pioneering work on pin tumbler locks, his son would not have had the foundation to create the improved designs that became industry standards. The Yale lock legacy is truly a collaborative achievement across 2 generations. Chapter 7. Impact on Security and Industry. The innovations of Linus Yale Sr. had far-reaching impacts that extended well beyond his own business success. His development of practical pin tumbler locks fundamentally changed how people thought about security and property protection. Before Yale's innovations, locks were often viewed as simple mechanical barriers that served more as deterrents than as serious obstacles to determined thieves. Yale's locks changed this perception by providing genuine security that could resist picking and manipulation. The banking industry was particularly transformed by Yale's innovations. Banks in the mid-19th century were increasingly important institutions in America's growing economy, but they were also vulnerable targets for robbery. Bank vaults of the era often used large, heavy locks that relied primarily on their mass and complexity for security. But these locks could often be picked or bypassed by skilled criminals. Yale's pin tumbler locks provided a new level of security that made bank vaults significantly more resistant to attack. Yale's locks also had important implications for urban development and architecture. As cities grew and buildings became taller and more densely packed, the security of individual apartments, offices, and shops became increasingly important. Yale's compact, reliable locks made it practical to secure multiple doors and buildings efficiently and affordably. This contributed to the development of apartment buildings, office complexes, and commercial districts, where people and businesses could operate with confidence in their security. The manufacturing methods Yale developed for producing locks had broader impacts on American industry. His emphasis on precision manufacturing, standardization of parts, and division of labor contributed to the broader movement toward modern manufacturing methods that would characterize American industry in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The techniques Yale used to produce locks could be applied to manufacturing clocks, firearms, sewing machines, and countless other products. Yale's success also demonstrated the economic value of intellectual property and patent protection. His patents gave him exclusive rights to manufacture locks based on his designs, allowing him to build a profitable business without immediately facing copycat competition. This demonstrated to other inventors and entrepreneurs that innovation could be protected and monetized, encouraging further investment in research and development. The patent system, which Yale utilized effectively, became an important driver of American technological progress. The security industry as we know it today owes much to Yale's pioneering work. Before Yale, lockmaking was a specialized craft practiced by individual blacksmiths and metal workers. Yale helped transform it into an industry with standardized products, quality control processes, marketing strategies, and distribution networks. This industrialization of security products made reliable locks accessible to a much broader market, democratizing security in a sense. Yale's innovations also influenced military and government security practices. Government offices, military installations, and diplomatic facilities all needed secure locks to protect classified documents and sensitive materials. Yale's locks provided a level of security that was suitable for these high-security applications, while being reliable enough for regular use. The trust that government agencies placed in Yale locks served as a powerful endorsement that further enhanced the brand's reputation. The international impact of Yale's work should not be overlooked. While Yale operated primarily in the American market, his innovations influenced lockmakers worldwide. European manufacturers studied Yale's designs and developed their own variations on pin tumbler mechanisms. The basic principles of pin tumbler locks that Yale refined became the foundation for lock technology globally, representing an American contribution to worldwide security technology. Yale's legacy also includes the fostering of a culture of continuous improvement in lock technology. His success demonstrated that there was commercial value in developing better, more secure locks, which encouraged others to enter the field and try to innovate further. This competitive environment drove ongoing improvements in lock security, materials, and manufacturing methods that continue to this day. Chapter 8. Challenges and Competition. Despite his innovations and business success, Linus Yale Sr. faced significant challenges throughout his career. The lockmaking industry in the mid-19th century was competitive, with numerous manufacturers producing various types of locks. Yale had to compete not just on the basis of security and quality, but also on price, availability, and reputation. Convincing customers to pay premium prices for Yale locks required demonstrating their superior security convincingly. One challenge Yale faced was educating the market about the advantages of pin-tumbler locks. Most people in the 1840s and 1850s had limited understanding of lock mechanisms and security principles. They chose locks based on appearance, price, or reputation, rather than technical merit. Yale had to invest time and effort in demonstrating how his locks worked, why they were more secure, and why they were worth their higher price. This educational marketing was essential but resource-intensive. Patent enforcement presented another significant challenge. While Yale held patents on his lock designs, enforcing these patents against infringers was difficult and expensive. The legal system of the era was less developed in intellectual property matters than it would later become, and proving patent infringement required technical expertise and financial resources for litigation. Yale undoubtedly faced competitors who copied aspects of his designs without authorization, forcing him to decide whether to pursue expensive legal action or accept some level of copying. Manufacturing quality control was an ongoing challenge. Producing locks with the precision Yale's designs required was difficult with the metalworking equipment available in the mid-19th century. Maintaining consistent quality across multiple workers and over time required constant vigilance, training, and investment in better tools and processes. Any lock that failed in the field or that proved vulnerable to picking could damage Yale's reputation, so quality control was not just a manufacturing issue, but a business imperative. Competition from imported locks, particularly from England, presented another challenge. English lock makers had centuries of experience and had developed sophisticated lock designs of their own. These imported locks often had prestige because of their European origin and the reputation of English craftsmanship. Yale had to position his American-made locks as equal or superior to these imported products, overcoming potential biases in favor of European goods. The challenge of scaling production to meet demand was significant. As Yale's locks gained popularity, he needed to increase production capacity without compromising quality. This required investment in equipment, facilities, and workforce training. Financing this growth in an era before modern capital markets was difficult, likely requiring Yale to reinvest profits and possibly take on partners or debt. Balancing growth with financial stability was a constant concern. Yale also faced technological challenges as he worked to improve his designs. Not all experiments succeeded, and development work consumed time and resources without guaranteed returns. The process of innovation involved many failures and dead ends before arriving at successful designs. Yale had to persist through these setbacks while continuing to run his business and meet customer commitments. The personal challenge of aging and succession planning would have been significant for Yale, particularly as he recognized that his son would need to take over the business eventually, transitioning from being the driving force behind the company to a more advisory role, while ensuring the business remained successful required careful planning and a willingness to cede control gradually. Despite these challenges, Yale persevered and built a successful business that outlasted him. His ability to overcome obstacles, adapt to changing circumstances, and maintain focus on his core mission of providing superior security products demonstrates the entrepreneurial spirit that characterized successful American industrialists of his era. Chapter 9. Final Years and Passing. The last decade of Linus Yale Sr.'s life, from approximately 1848 to 1858, was a period of consolidation and transition. By this time, Yale had established his reputation as a leading innovator in lock technology, and his business was on solid footing. However, this was also a period when he was preparing for succession and ensuring that his legacy would continue after his death. During these final years, Yale continued to refine his lock designs and develop new products. He remained actively involved in the business, overseeing manufacturing operations, working on new designs, and managing relationships with major customers. His hands-on approach and deep technical knowledge remained valuable assets for the company even as his son took on increasing responsibilities. Yale's relationship with his son Linus Yale Jr. during this period was characterized by collaboration and mentorship. The elder Yale was grooming his son to take over the business, sharing not just technical knowledge, but also business wisdom gained from years of experience. He introduced his son to key customers, suppliers, and business partners, ensuring smooth transitions in these relationships. He also encouraged his son's own innovations and design experiments, recognizing that the next generation would need to continue innovating to remain competitive. The 1850s were a period of significant change in America. The country was expanding westward. Industrialization was accelerating, and tensions were growing that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Yale's business operated within this changing context, with opportunities to supply locks for new construction in growing cities and challenges from economic fluctuations and social instability. Yale's health during his final years is not extensively documented, but we know that he died in 1858 at the age of 61. For the era, this was not an unusually young age. Life expectancy in mid-19th century America was considerably lower than today, and many men died in their 50s or 60s from diseases and conditions that would be treatable today. The specific cause of Yale's death is not clearly recorded in historical sources, which was common for the period. Yale's death represented the end of an era for his company, but not the end of his legacy. His son Linus Yale Jr. was well prepared to continue the business, and would go on to make even more significant contributions to lock technology in the coming years. The foundation that Linus Yale Sr. had built, the technical innovations, the manufacturing capabilities, the business relationships, and the reputation for quality provided a strong platform for continued success. The elder Yale's passing was likely mourned not just by his family, but by the broader community of locksmiths, metalworkers, and security professionals who recognized his contributions to the field. His innovations had fundamentally changed lock technology, and his business success had demonstrated that security products could be manufactured systematically rather than individually crafted. These achievements represented a significant legacy that would influence the industry for generations. In the years immediately following his death, Yale's contributions might have been overshadowed by his son's subsequent innovations and business expansion. The younger Yale's 1861 patent for the improved cylinder lock and the eventual formation of the Yale Lock Manufacturing Company in 1868 would bring the Yale name to worldwide prominence. However, none of this would have been possible without the foundational work of Linus Yale Sr. The estate and business arrangements following Yale's death would have involved transferring ownership and control to his son and possibly other family members or business partners. The details of these arrangements are not extensively documented, but the fact that the business continued successfully suggests that Yale had planned adequately for succession and that the transition was managed smoothly. Chapter 10, Enduring Legacy and Modern Impact. More than 150 years after his death, Linus Yale Sr. S influence on lock technology and security remains profound and pervasive. The pin-tumbler lock mechanism that he refined and made practical has become the most common lock type in the world. Millions of doors worldwide are secured by locks that operate on the same basic principles that Yale developed in the 1840s. This represents an extraordinary legacy. Few 19th century inventions remain so fundamentally unchanged and widely used today. The Yale brand name itself has become synonymous with locks and security. The Yale Lock Company, built on the foundation laid by Linus Yale Sr. and expanded by his son, grew into a global corporation. Yale locks are sold in virtually every country, and the name is recognized worldwide as representing quality and security. This brand recognition represents not just commercial success, but the lasting impact of the elder Yale's commitment to quality and innovation. Modern lock technology still relies heavily on pin tumbler mechanisms, while electronic locks, smart locks, and biometric security systems have added new dimensions to access control. Traditional mechanical pin tumbler locks remain widely used because they are reliable, durable, require no power source, and are economical to manufacture and install. The core technology developed by Yale in the 1840s continues to meet security needs in the 21st century, a testament to the soundness of his design principles. The manufacturing methods that Yale pioneered have also had lasting impact. His emphasis on precision manufacturing, standardization of components, and systematic quality control became standard practices in manufacturing across many industries. The interchangeability of parts that Yale implemented for locks became a cornerstone principle of modern manufacturing, enabling mass production and efficient repair and maintenance of products. Yale's legacy extends into education and professional training. Locksmithing schools and security training programs still teach the principles of pin tumbler locks, often beginning with an explanation of how Yale's original designs worked. Understanding Yale's innovations is considered fundamental knowledge for anyone working in the lock and security industry. This educational legacy ensures that new generations of security professionals appreciate the historical foundations of their field. The principle that security depends on internal complexity and precision manufacturing, which Yale exemplified, remains relevant in modern security design. Whether designing physical locks, encryption algorithms, or cybersecurity systems, the principle that complexity should be internal and hidden, while operation remains simple for legitimate users, continues to guide security engineering. Yale's insights about security design have thus influenced fields far beyond physical locks. Yale's story also serves as an inspiring example of American innovation and entrepreneurship. He identified a need in the market, developed a technical solution, built a business to manufacture and market his products, and created lasting value. His success without formal advanced education demonstrates how practical intelligence, persistence, and innovation can lead to significant achievements. This narrative resonates with the American ideal of self-made success through ingenuity and hard work. The preservation of Yale's patents and historical records has allowed researchers, historians, and security professionals to study his innovations in detail. These documents provide insights not just into lock technology, but into 19th century innovation processes, patent systems, and manufacturing methods. They serve as primary sources for understanding technological development in early industrial America. Museums and collections of antique locks often feature Yale's locks, preserving physical examples of his innovations. These artifacts allow people to see and understand how early pin tumbler locks worked, providing tangible connections to the history of security technology. Collectors prize original Yale locks as important pieces of industrial history, and examples in good condition can command significant prices in the antique market. The evolution of lock technology since Yale's time has been evolutionary rather than revolutionary, with each generation of lockmakers building on the foundation he established. Modern pin tumbler locks feature more pins, more complex keyways, anti-picking features, and harder materials, but the fundamental mechanism remains the same. This continuity demonstrates the enduring value of Yale's core innovation, a simple, elegant solution to the problem of mechanical security. Looking forward, as digital and electronic security systems become more prevalent, Yale's legacy faces new relevance. Many modern security systems combine traditional mechanical locks with electronic components, recognizing that physical security remains important even in our digital age. The reliability and independence from power sources that mechanical locks provide ensure they will remain relevant for the foreseeable future, continuing Yale's legacy into new generations. Conclusion: Linus Yale Sr. was more than an inventor. He was a pioneer who transformed lockmaking from a craft into an industry, and in doing so, significantly improved security for people and institutions. His development of practical pin tumbler locks addressed real security needs with an elegant technical solution that proved both effective and manufacturable. His business acumen allowed him to translate his technical innovations into commercial success, building a company and a brand that would outlast him by more than a century and a half. Yale's legacy includes the specific locks he invented, the manufacturing methods he developed, the business he built, and most importantly, the son he trained to carry on and expand his work. The Yale name remains prominent in the lock industry today because both father and son were innovators who understood that success required not just clever designs, but also quality manufacturing, effective marketing, and genuine value for customers. In an age when we often focus on recent technological innovations, it's valuable to remember pioneers like Linus Yale Sr., whose work from the 1840s continues to protect homes, businesses, and institutions worldwide. Every time we insert a key into a lock, we're benefiting from principles and mechanisms that Yale refined nearly 2 centuries ago. This enduring relevance is the true measure of his contribution, not just that he invented something impressive for his time, but that he solved a fundamental problem so well that his solution remains valid today. Linus Yale Sr. lived during a transformative period in American history, and he contributed significantly to the technological progress that characterized that era. His story exemplifies how individual innovation, when combined with practical business sense and a commitment to quality, can create lasting change. The locks that secure our doors today are a daily reminder of Yale's legacy, a legacy of security, precision, and enduring innovation.